My name is Grace Vickers. I'm the Plastic Pellet Free Waters Associate with US PIRG. We're on the steering committee for the International Plastic Pellet Count in 2026, as are most of these or all of these lovely people that are here to talk about the problem, how we can address it, and the event that we're hosting on May 2nd. So through this webinar, you'll learn more about the event, the International Plastic Pellet Count, and its history last year, the impact of plastic pellet pollution, how it impacts our communities and people's lives, and its impacts on wildlife, particularly our birds, and then learn from Jace about how to collect pellets and how to accurately report your data. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chelsea McDonald from Waterkeeper Alliance to talk about last year's event.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Grace. And I'm really excited to be joining everyone on the panel today. So we just wanted to give a little bit of an overview about what happened last year so you can have an understanding of the scope of what you'll be participating in and what we're trying to achieve. And for those of you who've never seen plastic pellets before, here's a photo of some of them on the screen. And on our next slide, you'll be able to see why we're trying to do this count. And so these pellets get spread through the environment from a multitude of sources, including the factories where they're made, as well as along where they're transported and ultimately sent, as well as recycling facilities. Despite this, and despite the fact it's happening all around the world, we don't have good official counts of the pollution, how much it is, and hotspots beyond these citizen science projects. And so it's incredibly important what you're doing, and the data we're collecting doesn't really exist other places. Um, and the next slide, we'll see that last year, in our very first year ever, we had so much more success than we were anticipating. Over 50,000 pellets were picked up throughout the course of the event from over 229 sites in 14 countries, 29 states, and over 1,000 volunteers participated. And you can see some of the folks who participated found no pellets, and you should definitely still log that data so you can be included in our account. But other places had a lot more pellets. I think this is actually a photo I stole from Bill, one of our speakers later on, in terms of what's happening in Congaree. And so definitely this is an issue that you'll be able to participate with folks around the world in solving together. For our next slide, in the US, we had participants throughout the country. You can see a lot of folks along the coasts. But also, even if you are in one of these landlocked states that didn't have a count last year, we're still really excited about your data because we know that rail spills and all sorts of different transport issues can lead to pellet issues. And so we're hoping to find more and more of that data. So if you live there, please participate. If you have cousins, friends, colleagues who've lived in those states, also have them participate. And you can see last year some of the largest collections happened in Texas, as well as in a few other states. On the next slide, we'll see our data from throughout the world. So a wide range of countries participated. We're hoping to continue to grow that. And especially we had a strong showing from Australia for countries outside of the US. And so for our next slide, we mostly just wanted to say thank you for coming to learn about pellets, to think about participating, and really participating in changing this issue and raising awareness of it. And with that, I will turn it back to Grace and our other speakers.
Thank you, Chelsea. Next, we're going to hear from Bill from Congaree Waterkeepers. Tell us a little bit more about the human side of plastic pellet pollution and how it impacts communities all over the country and all over the world.
Thanks, Grace. Yeah, so I'm Bill Stangler. I'm your Congaree Riverkeeper, based in Columbia, South Carolina. I'd say I started hearing about nurdles and nurdle pollution several years ago. And it was when the waterkeeper downstream from me, Charleston Waterkeeper, there was a big spill in Charleston Harbor, and they started seeing nurdles wash up on the beaches around there. And so I had to learn what are nurdles, because suddenly there were conversations happening all across our state about these things. The more I learned about it, I was seeing the work that other people were doing. So, like Diane in Texas, and Evan and Eric doing work up in the Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area, working on nurdle pollution. And I knew we had a plastic production facility on our river. And we'd been looking at it for a couple different things, but decided we're going to start going out and looking and see if we could find plastic pellets. So worked with a bunch of these other groups, and did the YouTube trainings on Nurdle Patrol so that I could figure out how I'm supposed to count these things. And we went out, and I'm going to pull up a screen real quick here and show you kind of some of what we saw. Um, so we went out, and I mentioned there's this big facility. Um, so this huge plastic production facility on the Congaree River. You can see the riverbend, you can see a sandbar there. Multiple production lines at this facility, and this all drains to a little tributary that comes in into the Congaree River right here. So we went down and we looked, and we started looking around for nurdles, and we found them. And what I found was we went to some sandbars downstream. This is also when I became a hand model. Um, so we started finding the pellets. And if you do this work, there will be a bunch of photos of your hands with like little jars or pellets in your hand. But we found a couple dozen walking around on the sandbar doing the 10-minute timed thing. And then I started looking at some other places, and I went to you can kind of see the facility on this map here. We went to the sandbars, we went along the river banks, we went into that discharge channel. We also went to the frontage road for the facility. We went to these rail crossings, and instead of finding a couple, we were finding hundreds to thousands of nurdles in some of these places. This is just a little quick photo of what that frontage road looks like. This is a mile of road that looks almost exactly like this entire. So in 10 minutes by myself, I picked up 5,000 nurdles. Chelsea, I think it was the day after the count ended, so I didn't make it in. I could have had like one of the top ones, but it was like a day later. Um, and so, we have concerns. This plastic is being discharged from this facility. It's going into the river. This is 10 miles above Congaree National Park. This is just 10 miles below the city of Columbia. We know this stuff is getting out in the environment. We're concerned that fish are eating it. We're concerned that birds are eating it because this looks like food to animals. And also, these nurdles act like sponges for other pollutants. They're in the water column, they're in the sediment, and other pollutants will glom onto them, and it allows them to be transported. So this work is really important. It does allow us to identify these sources. It tells us where these problems are, but it can also do more than that. And so what we did last year is we filed a notice of intent to sue letter against two major plastic producing companies, Alpec Polyester and Eastman Chemical. And now we're in active litigation with them over their violations of the Clean Water Act and Resource Conservation Recovery Act. I'm not saying everyone's Nurdle Patrol will lead to a federal lawsuit, but it could, and that can be really important to addressing these problems. So yeah, that's what we've been doing on Nurdles. Really impactful work. I like to tell people, and it's hard for us. We have to take a boat and run down there. We're going into these interesting areas. We're picking along sandbars. I like to say when Andrew was doing this in Charleston, he got to go for a nice leisurely stroll on the beach. We have to sometimes jump our boat over logs into a discharge channel of a plastic production facility. It's a little different, but any way that you can get out and do this kind of sampling can be really helpful. And I will turn it back over to y'all now.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, definitely a lot of ways that this impacts communities and waterways all over the world. But it also impacts the wildlife that relies on those waterways, which Liz from American Bird Conservancy is going to tell us more about.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. So you're sharing my screen, right? So I'll let you do that. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Liz Virgil, and I'm the Texas Coastal Program Manager out in the upper like Houston Galveston region. I work for American Bird Conservancy, and I lead the SPLASH program, which focuses on removing and preventing trash pollution from bird habitats. So I have the maybe not as uplifting, but important privilege to talk to y'all about the impacts of plastic and plastic pellets on our wildlife. So if you go to the next slide, this picture, I think on the left-hand side, perfectly sums up why plastic pellets are the detriment in being eaten by our wildlife because they look like fish eggs and they also look like other like floating planktonic food. So they're often mistaken as nutritious meals when floating in our waterways and in our oceans. And they don't just look like this food, they also smell like plankton. In the ocean, plastics are known to develop a chemical coating of dimethyl sulfide, which is a compound released by plankton when they're grazed upon or die. So like animals who've evolved to locate their prey through smell, like albatross or sea turtles, are locating these DMS-coated plastic pellets, consuming them like food. So nurdles, plastics are not just looking like food, they smell like it too. Additionally, if you go to the next slide, wildlife who sift, skim, filter, and gulp large, amounts of water are also consuming prey and plastic in the waters too. So like baleen whales, manta rays, roseate spoonbills, black skimmers, even oysters have been found to have plastics in their tissues. So if you go to the next slide, once they're ingested, they can cause physical damage. So on the left-hand side is a picture of plastics found in, I believe, a shearwater. So they either can like physically damage the internal digestive system. They can cause stomach blockage, cause false fullness that can lead to starvation. But additionally, and unfortunately, they also can cause biological damage because they aren't just consuming plastics, they're also consuming all of the chemicals and contaminants that are bonded to the plastics or are the additives in plastics. So if you think like BPA, phthalates, PCBs, DDT, all that stuff, when wildlife is consuming the plastics, they're also consuming those chemical contaminants. Um, and as plastics remain in an animal's digestive system, these chemicals are leaching into the organism's tissues. They're causing hormone disruption, reduced fertility, immune system damage. So plastic ingestion is not just like a one-time event, but it does cause like chronic, lifelong exposure as it remains in an animal system, causing physical and biological damage. And so then if you go to the next slide. Unfortunately, it's not just these singular animals who are impacted as they are eating these plastic pellets. Once these pellets are eaten by one organism, they now enter the food chain where prey are transferring these plastics and these chemicals up the food chain in higher and higher concentrations, where top predators like our seabirds, marine predators, and even us as humans are consuming them in large quantities unknowingly. So if you go to the next slide, plastic pellets are coming for us too as humans. Research is beginning to uncover exactly how much plastic is in the human body and its impacts, but essentially we're finding them kind of everywhere in our systems, like from our brain to our reproductive tissues, and we're just trying to figure out now what that means for our health as humans. But if you go to the next slide, from studying seabirds, researchers have identified a condition, a disease called plasticosis in seabirds, and it's a form of fibrosis where chronic ingestion of plastic leads to scarring, thickening, and stiffening of internal tissues, which often damages organs or restricts functions, and plasticosis ultimately reduces the overall health of a seabird. So plastics in wildlife is essentially changing the biology of these animals and not for the better, unfortunately. So I guess if you go to the last slide too, our seabirds are essentially the canary in the coal mine for our plastic pollution problem. So if they are negatively impacted by our plastic pollution, our human health and environmental health are likely impacted, if not soon to follow. Our health is tightly linked to our wildlife and our environment. So this concept of One Health recognizes the importance of collaborating on all fronts to tackle these threats of plastic pollution, how it impacts us all, our birds, our wildlife, our environment, and us. So with that, thanks for leaning into this heavy kind of not positive outlook on plastic pollution, but an important thing to recognize. And it's great that y'all are taking action to be part of this solution. So I'll hand it back over to you, Grace.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. Yeah, it's definitely really impacting our wildlife and our ecosystems that we rely really heavily on, in our environment. So thankfully there's a lot we can do about it, and participating in the International Plastic Pellet Count can help to tackle a lot of these really big, scary problems that we're seeing. And Jace can give us a little bit more of an overview about how we actually do that.
Yeah, great. Okay. Let me do the presenter mode here. So yeah, I'm at Texas A&M Corpus Christi and at the Heart Research Institute, and I run the Nurdle Patrol project. So when you go out to do a survey, you want to make sure that you're actually picking up nurdles and you're counting nurdles. rather than other bits of plastic. So this diagram just sort of shows you what is a nurdle and what isn't. Some common things you'll find are like fishing beads. So on leaders, there will be little beads on there. Those have a hole in them. Airsoft pellets are pretty common. Those are actually a product. So, nurdles are melted down to be able to make those. So we don't count those. And then you'll find seeds. You can actually find rocks. We don't count styrofoam pellets either. So if you can squeeze them and they break, or that you can squeeze them and they're squishy, they're not nurdles. This is just for if there's any researchers out there and you want to look at the methodology in a scientific way, just type in Nurdle Patrol sampling methodology and this publication will come up on the internet. But I'm going to go through and tell you, simplify it. And so this is a real easy method where you go out, you look for 10 minutes, you count how many nurdles you find after that 10 minutes, and then you go to nurdlepatrol.org and you put how many you found in there and where you were at and the date. That's real simplified. But what I want to do is I'm going to show you how to do one if you're at a beach or if you're at a lake or you're at a river. Because it is a little bit different. I mean, it's the same, but a little bit different because on a beach, you actually have tides. So the water could be moving back and forth. So there's going to be something on the reporting form, and I'll show you that reporting form here in a second. But the reporting form has something called a new strand line versus old strand line. And the strand line is just where the debris is. And so the new strand line is either from the water up to, say, if you're on a beach, the high tide line. Anything above that is going to be the old strand line. So the new strand line is where the water's been in the last 24 hours. The old strand line could be 2 days ago, could be a week ago, could be a year ago. But if you're on the beach, that's where you're going to want to look, where that new strand line is on the left-hand side, the upper edge of it, since these float. That's where you're going to find the nurdles, is up at that upper edge. Now, for the old strand line, a great place to look is up by, if you have sand dunes, they'll be up by the sand dunes. If you have a rock barrier, they'll be up by the rock barrier. It's whenever you had a storm surge and you had a lot of debris go up, wherever the highest point it could go up to, that's usually a pretty good sign of where to look. And looking for other little bits of colorful plastic, usually you're going to find nurdles there. So if you're on a river or a lake, the water's not really moving as much unless it's raining, or something like that. But if you go out there, you'll want to look at the new strand line. That's right where the water's been in the last 24 hours. That's where you'll look first. The old strand line is anything above that. So I've done surveys along the Mississippi River, and there's a lot of nurdles on the Mississippi River, but I go up where I see a debris line for the old strand line. And anytime you move the sticks and leaves around, that's where you're going to find the nurdles. So this is if you're on a lake or a river. And so you start your 10 minutes once you pick up your first nurdle. That's when you start. You start picking them up, look for 10 minutes, and then after that, then you count them at the end, and then you insert your data. And so that's what I'm going to show you now, is how you insert your data. And there's a couple different ways to do it. One is there's a website, so you can do it on your phone. Go to nurdlepatrol.org and go submit data, and then a form will come up. And it just has your name for organization. You put your organization in there. For the latitude, longitude, you actually don't add latitude, longitude in there. You just touch the map of where you're at, like it's a Google Earth type map. You zoom into it, touch it, and it'll automatically populate that. Then put the country you're in and location. You put like if you're at a park, put the park. You could put this town you're in, just any information that we can see where you're at. And then of course the date, how many volunteers you're with. So if you're with a group and there's 10 of you, put 10 volunteers, how many minutes you collected, 10 minutes is typical. Some people go out for an hour, so they put 60 there. And then the amount that everyone collected in there. And so the database automatically standardizes all the data to one person for 10 minutes. And so I'll show you here in a second how you can see all that. But then put the photo of how the nurdles that you had. And so if there's enough to put in your hand, put it in your hand. If it's in your bottle, a bottle. We want to make sure that you're actually collecting the nurdles and not some other type of plastic. And then in the notes there, you could put International Plastic Pellet Count, so that we know you're part of the group. And we'll know that anyway because of the date you go out. So if you want to, you do it on the phone app. This is the steps. There's 3 steps the first time you use it. The first time you got to create a profile, and that's basically you just put your name and email in there and then your location. That you only have to do that one time. After that, it'll show up, like if you do a survey for the second time, it'll show up at your location, or you can change the location on the map because the map's what shows up first. You just press your finger on it and it'll populate the latitude, longitude on the next page. So I have a yellow arrow down here at the bottom, you'll see on the app that says submit survey. So you click on that, and then that's where the reporting form comes up where you say how many minutes you collected, how much, location, and all that. So it should be real simple. It literally takes like 1 minute to do a survey after you actually create a profile the first time. After you press submit, your data is going to show up on this dot on this map as a colored dot. So green is 0. So if you go out and do a survey and you don't find any, still put that in there. That shows that there's not any in there. That gives us important information. And then it's color coded. The warmer the color gets, the higher the concentration of pellets is. And the map is like a Google Earth. Like I said, you can zoom into your house, zoom into the park where you did your survey. And if you want, you can click on the dot and what we call metadata will show up, and it'll show the location you were at and all that. And it tells the amount that was collected. And then I did have this on here. This is Charleston Waterkeeper. Bill just talked about this, but this was all the Charleston Waterkeeper went out and they did, I mean, probably 300 different surveys to try to pinpoint where the problem of plastic pellets was coming from. And they ended up doing that, and they sued a company and ended up getting money for doing water quality projects. But it just shows you overall how Nurdle Patrol can be used to help solve some problems. Here's the latest stats. We have 15,000 volunteers around the world and over 31 surveys. So y'all can be a part of that. Okay, if you don't remember anything else that I said this whole time, go to the homepage at nurdlepatrol.org and you'll see this 4-minute video, and it will give you instructions on how to do the survey, whether you're at a beach or river, and show you how to put the data in and why we're doing it. Just 4 minutes. So that's if you don't remember anything else, that's it. And that's it for me. I'll stop sharing my screen and send it back over.
Awesome. Thank you, Jace. Yeah, like Jace said, the data is just so important to creating lasting change and lasting solutions on this issue. It is a really big problem, like Bill and Liz outlined. So that's why we need all of you and so many people to go out and count pellets for the International Plastic Pellet Count on May 2nd. We do have a couple minutes to answer any questions that anybody has. If you want to drop a question in the chat to any of the panelists, we'll be happy to answer some questions. I think Jace, we already have one. I think it's for you. Do you have to make an account on Nerdle Patrol to enter data?
What was the question?
Do you have to make an account on Nerdle Patrol to enter data?
Oh, no account needed. It's once you put your information in there, you're good to go. You don't even have to put your email in there. We just require to put a name so we know it's a real person. And the name will not show up on the website either. So we try to the organization will show up, but not the person's name. So that's just for privacy purposes.
Another question is it a problem if we do our Nerdle Patrol the week before or on a different date as May 2nd? Is that a problem? Chelsea, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can jump in. So while May 2nd is our big day, and it would be great to have as many folks to go out as possible, as we learned from last year, as Bill alluded to, we know that sometimes weather is bad in different places, people have different plans. So any data that's logged into Nerdle Patrol for the entire month of May will be included in the official count. So if you want to go out multiple times, you can. If you're going out May 29th, you will still be a part of this effort. But by participating on May 2nd, we're going to just get those early numbers that we're hoping to build momentum on, and have some unity around it. But please don't feel limited to that day. And so any time in the month of May will be able to be included. The follow-up question that I see in the chat is if you do it in April, the data is not going to be included. That's correct. Unfortunately, we do have to just have some kind of parameters, if only to be able to pull the data. So it is going to be limited to that month of May. However, going out is still a major victory. Participating in this, the data will always live in Nerdle Patrol. It just won't be transferred into our final report count. But that doesn't mean April data is less valuable.
Yeah, I've got
Well,
a question that Jace can probably help with. I know when I was watching the training videos, and I think you've mentioned it before on some other stuff, that you recommend people don't use tools. This is just hand collection of nurdles. And I know, with the litigation stuff, we do it a little differently sometimes. So I bought like a sampling dredge and I use a net sometimes. But for these ones, for the counts, it's still just hand picking up nurdles, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that actually. Yeah, the issue with using tools is you can't compare one site to another. So if somebody goes out and using a shovel or a net or sieves, you can't really compare somebody who's just doing it by the hand. So the methodology is by hand only, and that way it's going to be comparable to anyone else around the world that's doing it. Yeah, great point.
Yeah, so we don't upload our dredge stuff to Nerdle Patrol. That stays somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, good. As long as you're tracking it some way and it's usable, you know.
awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, thanks everyone for coming, and thank you to our panelists for, like demonstrating their expertise and telling us a little bit more about the event. The video will be available online recorded, so if you missed any of it, you'll be able to see it online at probably at pelletcount.org sometime soon. So thanks everyone.